Hello and welcome back to a major championship edition of Green on the Greens. Me and Brian Giuffra, our special guest this week, are here to preview the Open Championship, the 150th official playing of the Open Championship. We're heading to the old course at St. Andrews. Brian, how you doing today?
I'm doing great, but I'm not calling it the Open Championship. It's the British Open, and that's a fact. I don't care as many times as they try and hammer home the Open Championship. They should have never allowed the British Open to be such a thing if that's what they wanted. But it's too late for me. It's the British Open for me.
We're about to start fighting right off the bat because I am in the complete other camp of this. But that's a discussion for another time, I do believe. Before we get into our Open Championship slash British Open thoughts, wanted to talk a little bit about the Scottish Open last week. Xander Schauffele winning his technically his third start in a row because he also won the JP McManus Pro Am over in Ireland last week as well. Um, Brian, what are your thoughts about Xander? A guy who in the context of how we talk about him often is he doesn't win enough for how talented he is, and now he's starting to win, and that's kind of the same thing we were saying about Matt Fitzpatrick before he won the U.S. Open. So what are your thoughts on Xander coming into the Open?
Well, I think that's a really hopeful comparison for the Xander Schauffele fans of the world, like Ian, who I know is a big fan and bets him heavily every year. Listen, I'm a big Xander guy. Obviously, has seemingly the entire game needed to succeed in a situation like this. He just proved it at the Scottish Open. I think he's someone I'm not betting on, but I think there's a lot of reasons why you should be thinking about him this week.
Yeah, I agree. When I wrote my betting preview over at FanSided, I have him as one of my three outright picks just because I had to have him on the card with how well he's playing and the way, this course demands an all around game and someone who's not going to implode. And he's showing that he has whatever it is, call it a winning gene, a clutch gene, or whatever. He's developed a little bit of that over the past couple of months. So I like what I'm seeing from him. But let's talk a little bit about the Open Championship on a macro scale, especially with it being the 150th, playing of it. Um, it's St. Andrews, it's the old course, and we've seen some great champions here. We've seen Louis Oosthuizen, not necessarily great, but I mean that's where he kind of had his coming out party in 2010. We've seen Tiger Woods win here. We've seen so many people win here, and we can even throw Zach Johnson in the mix if you want to. Let's talk about the historical significance of this. What do you think that winning the 150th Open Championship, especially at St. Andrews, would mean to these guys, and how much pressure it puts on them this week?
In fact, I'm going to be talking about that a lot as we're making our picks here. When you look back at the history of the game, these types of moments tend to lead to these like otherworldly performance. 50th edition of the Masters, Jack Nicklaus won that in '86. The 100th U.S. Open, Tiger Woods blows out the field at Pebble Beach, with a 15-shot victory. So it tends to happen where some great player rises to this moment. So I think that's going to happen this week. That's a little tease for my pick. But ultimately, the pressure of winning a major championship is more than the pressure of winning the 150th British Open. So I think, yeah, they're obviously going to be thinking about it and talking about it a lot this week. Everybody in the game is acting as if this is like the holy grail moment of golf, which I agree with, right? Everybody who's there is saying it's very special. So I think a special champion is going to be crowned this week.
It's funny you said Holy Grail right there because I saw a quote from Rory earlier today where he was asked, is winning an Open at St. Andrews is a resume for, an elite golfer, an all-time great golfer, incomplete without it. And he said he doesn't think it's incomplete, but this is the Holy Grail and it sets your resume apart if you're able to do it. And so I think that's a really good way to put it is that this is set up on a pedestal because it's that St. Andrews, not necessarily because it's the 150th. It's fitting that the 150th is at St. Andrews, but I think St. Andrews is the part that sets it apart more than its place in the timeline of the Open Championship.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely.
but that's a great point about in history that we've seen a lot of the historical major championships won by guys who rise to the occasion, and I think that speaks to a lot of why those all-time great players are all-time greats because of how they perform in those types of moments. Do you agree with that?
I completely agree. And listen, we've seen it actually this year with some guys who could go on to be all-time greats, right? Winning those majors with clutch performances. I mean, you talk about Fitzpatrick's shot on 18 at Brookline from the bunker. I mean, that's an all-time shot. Scheffler's chip in on 3 at the Masters. I mean, that's an all-time shot. So I think you're going to see some fireworks and some moments that people will be talking about for years to come at the British Open this week.
And I mean, you can even add, JT in the playoff, his approach on 17, where he stuck it so close on that shot. I mean, 3 shots and 3 major championships thus far that pretty much go into what you're talking about. So I'm 100% with you. Anything else you would like to add about the British Open Championship before we get into our picks, Brian?
No, I just like saying British Open because I can see it's messing with you a little bit. And I think that's going to help me as we get into the picks and we start, chopping it up and deciding whose picks are better than whose.
Well, given the streak that I have been on this show, yours are most likely going to be better. But thankfully, we have a pick that is the same, and we'll get to that in a little bit. But we're going to start, as we always do, with Miss the Cut. We are not doing closest to the win until Ian returns. But so we're going to start with Miss the Cut. Brian, who is your pick to miss the cut this week?
Yeah, it's Taylor Gooch. For anybody who knows me, they know that I'm fading the Live Golf Tour players in every major. We already saw that happen at the U.S. Open. I think that's going to be a trend that continues. There's a lot of reasons why I think that the Live Tour doesn't really set you up for success in these major championships. But just thinking about Gooch specifically, he has 2 top tens on the 2 Live Tour events, but his lowest round on those was a 69. So I believe that I believe that this week is going to be a low scoring event. So you need to go low, and I think the cut line is going to be low, and I don't know that he has the game for that over 2 days. He missed the cut at the U.S. Open. It's only his second British Open appearance. A key stat for me is shots gained off the tee and shots gained putting. He's 141st and 106th in those respective categories. He's good on approach shots and around the green, but I just don't really think that he's prepared for the pressure that we were just alluding to or prepared for this moment. And I don't think that the Live Tour has gotten him to a place where he's going to all of a sudden rise to the occasion, on what is arguably the biggest major championship of all time.
No, I agree. I think I'm 100% on board with this pick. There's only one Live guy who I'm not fading this week, and that's Louis, just because he's a past winner here, and then the other time he was in a playoff and lost as the runner-up. So I mean, and he's actually been in decent form recently too. He played an event in Europe and finished T8. But in terms of like Gooch and all these guys, like it's really hard to trust them when I mean, like everything you just said, but also they're playing 54 hole events. You know what I mean? And like a 72 hole grind on a regular PGA Tour event is different than a 54 hole shotgun start. And now you throw in the pressure of a major championship. And I just don't think these Live guys are, especially a young guy like Gooch, who, like you said, is playing in his second British Open. That's not something I'm favorable toward. So I'm 100% with you on this one. You're probably not going to be favorable with my Miss the Cut pick, who is, as I tend to do, fly close to the sun, Scotty Scheffler to miss the cut. Um, he's coming off a miscut at the Scottish Open, and he has kind of talked about how he's still trying to figure out links golf. And that's something that worries me coming to one of the most purest tests of links golf that we have in St. Andrews. He was T8 at the Open last year at Royal St. George's, but that's nothing like St. Andrews in terms of how it's going to play. And if there's one thing that scares me about it, it's that he's really dangerous with his wedges, which he showed at Augusta and he's shown, throughout this entire year. But I think when you're in at St. Andrews and you're hitting these wedge shots with the way these fairways are apparently running out right now, you're going to be in really weird lengths and really weird angles and have to hit the greens in the right spots. And with him still trying to figure, according to him, still trying to figure out links golf, I just don't have a lot of faith. I've seen plus 400 consensus odds, which shows that this is definitely a little bit of a bold call, but I'm willing to chase that number because I just don't think that I think his inexperience in links golf is going to not allow him to live up to the standard that he's set for himself this year.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think he's going to live up to the standard of of a win and a top five. And I know he missed the cut at the PGA, but The reason why I actually don't like this pick is because he's super creative around the greens. I mentioned the shot on 3. That's a shot got a little lucky at Augusta that went in. But regardless, he is an amazing putter. He's got great hands around the green. I understand what you're saying in terms of like the wedge game, and obviously it's a different game when you're trying to hit some weird yardages from some weird angles and possibly some undulation that he's not really prepared for there. But I just like his game around the green. I just think a guy like him isn't going to miss a cut in a moment like this. I don't think he's going to finish top 20 or top 10 or anything like that. But I'm not willing to touch it, even if you're just sprinkling a little on it. I wouldn't sprinkle.
Yeah, like I said, with Miss the Cut, I tend to find a guy who, like you said, I don't think is going to finish in the top 20 and then see the number and I get a little excited about it and fly a little close to the sun. But here we are and I'm rolling with it. So
I
let's
love
move
it.
on to the good finishes this week. Who do you have as your top 20 pick?
Well, I mean, this is just one for the heartstrings. Tiger Woods, plus 300. I absolutely love Tiger this week. He's been preparing for this for months, since he decided to skip the US Open. You can see there's an energy about him this week that he hasn't had in past weeks. And that's only because I'm a nerd and I've watched some of his practice rounds. He is a historian of the game. He loves the history of the game. He understands his place in history and he wants to continue to add to that. And I really feel like he's targeted this event this year as the one where he has the best potential to compete in it. And I think that's why you've seen him play over 50 practice holes over this week. He hasn't played 50 holes consecutive this entire year, right? Other than Augusta. And the fact that he's doing that in the lead up to the British Open, I think shows that his body's in a really good place. But beyond that, he's actually driving the ball over 300 yards. He's hitting fairways at a high rate, much higher rate than what we're used to seeing. His approach shots have been streaky. His proximity to the hole has not been great. But again, major championship conditions, you have to take that with a grain of salt. But creativity, we talked about it earlier. It's so important at St. Andrews and can be that difference maker, right? Especially for somebody with the short game that Tiger has and has always had, and of course knowledge that he's had, having played at St. Andrews. I believe this is going to be his 5th Open played there, either 5th or 6th. And having that course knowledge is critical. And then the other thing that I really like for Tiger this week is it's not going to be windy or cold. The temperature is supposed to be in the 60s to 70s. The wind is supposed to gust at up to 25 miles an hour. But over there, that's nothing, right? You're talking about usually for a course like St. Andrews to really be protected, you're looking at like 30 to 40 mile an hour winds. They're not going to sniff that. And I think that especially if Tiger can get to the weekend, which of course I think he will, they're supposed to go down. The winds are supposed to go down. And let's say he's playing in one of those earlier groups on Saturday. I could see him make a move up that leaderboard, and that's why I'm targeting top 20 for him.
I am fully on board, and it is a little bit of a heartstring thing, but at the same time, I liken St. Andrews a lot to Augusta, and it was one of the reasons why I bet heavily on Tiger to make the cut at Augusta. And it's that course knowledge and that savvy is so invaluable at a tournament like this. And no one in this field at the level of golf that Tiger Woods is capable of playing has that type of knowledge that he does. When you throw in the creativity, you throw in the fact that these fairways are running out like 60, 70 yards, his length that he's lost is going to be mitigated by that. So I love him as a top 20 play, especially if you're going to get plus 300. Like that's crazy
Yeah.
value for a player who I think is for a top 20. That's a terrific bet. So I'm 100% on board. I
One more
placed
thing
that bet
before
on
you jump.
Monday.
One more thing before you jump into your pick. He missed the cut at St. Andrews last year. Or last time it was here when Zach Johnson won in 15. That's going to motivate him. He wants
Mhm.
to show something. Now he was hurt at that time, but he wants to prove something this week, and I think he's going to do it.
And also, I mean, you throw in all of that for the motivation. This is potentially his last chance to compete at St. Andrews and actually contend. And all the greats, in every sport, they're motivated by that last chance or the potential slights and stuff like that. And so the fact that he may not get another chance to do this, I think is just going to make him I mean, we've seen it already, like you said, with the practice rounds. Like he is intensely motivated in a way we haven't seen Tiger intensely motivated in quite a while, I feel like.
Completely.
Moving on to my top 20 pick, it's not as sexy, but I love it. I have Max Homa to finish in the top 20. I can't believe I'm getting plus 225 at win for this bet because Max Homa has been a top 20 player in the world for about the past 6, 7 months, and it feels like the odds makers just aren't noticing it. So I'm going to keep taking advantage of it. In his last 6 starts worldwide, he has finished outside the top 20 just twice, and one of those was a T23. So in 5 of his last 6, he's been inside the top 25. He was T16 last week at the Scottish Open, and more importantly, he started to show more form in majors, which he has stated was a big goal coming into 2022. Was his game was coming along and he was establishing himself as a solid, steady PGA Tour pro, but he wanted to elevate himself towards more towards that elite tier, and I think he's on his way to doing that. He hasn't totally done it yet, but he's on his way. But I mean, everything has been shaping up for him to play this course well. He's an accurate driver of the ball, but he also drives it pretty well for being an accurate player off the tee. He's gaining 1.22 strokes tee to green per round over his last 40 rounds, which is inside the top 20 in this field. My one concern and why I don't have him higher than a top 20 is that the putter can be a little bit erratic. But the thing about St. Andrews is you're always talking about lag putting more than trying to sink a 60 footer. You just want to get that 60 footer inside of 5 feet, and Max Home is very good in that regard. And so I don't think he's going to be in danger of putting up the big numbers on the scorecard. And so I think a top 20 at plus 225 is a great bet.
I think it's a good bet. I think that's Max Homa's short game coach calling you up to say, stop talking smack about his putting, because I'm about to talk smack about his scrambling, which is not very good. He only converts 57.9% on scrambling, and his sand save percentage is 50-50, like literally 50%. Scrambling from the rough, 178th on the PGA Tour, 50.4%. I have some concerns about Max Homa here. I don't think it's a bad bet. I agree there's a value to it. So that's the reason why I would say like it could happen. I'm a little concerned because again, we've seen St. Andrews, who it really favors are the people whose short games are prepared for the test.
And I agree with that, but I think what really put me over the edge for it was the T16 at the Scottish Open last week, which should
Yep.
have been a top 10 if he hadn't have missed a shorty on the 18th hole. But on Sunday, but I think he showed a lot of prowess around there, and I think he's grown as the year has gone on in terms of that scrambling. Like, yes, that was a big problem, but as we started to see these top 20 finishes roll around, those numbers have started to improve a little bit. Let me look at my numbers real quick. So over the last 40 rounds, he is basically breaking even in terms of strokes gained around the green, which he was losing about a half a stroke around the green earlier in the year. So I mean, he has improved on that. And like I said, like that's the reason I'm going top 20. I love Max Homa's game and I love where he's trending as a player.
Yeah.
And there was a part of me that wanted to bet him top 10, but those concerns that you spoke about are why I limited myself to the top 20.
Good call. I love it.
All right, let's move on to our top 10 pick. Who do you have as the top 10 at St. Andrews?
I love Matt Fitzpatrick to finish in the top 10. Forget about the fact that he was almost perfect at the US Open, especially on Sunday. Obviously, he had that hiccup on Saturday where he kind of lost his way, but he really found it on Sunday. He's got 3 straight top 10s. In the majors this year, he's got a T5 at the PGA, a T12 at the Masters. He hasn't, admittedly, played his best over on his home soil, right? Which is kind of surprising. You'd think a guy like him would play well over there. His best finish at the British is a T20. But I just really think his game and his ability to now overpower a golf course is really going to come into play this week. He's third in shots gained tee to green, and that a lot of that is because of how dominant he is off the tee. 10th in shots gained off the tee in the PGA Tour this year, and 25th in shots gained approach to the green. Listen, he's the type of guy who I feel like his confidence right now is at an all-time high, and his game to me sets up perfectly for St. Andrews. Now, I don't know if his past, if the course setups weren't as great, weren't as favorable. But a place like this where power really matters and being able to go low really matters, I love him because he just has that ability to put birdies together, to get a couple eagles out there. And I could just see, I could see him just following it up and being in contention. It also tends to be like that when a guy wins a major. They either kind of implode the next time or they're in contention. I do not see Fitzpatrick imploding on this course in this moment.
So going back to the Scottish Open last week, he was T6 and feels like the quietest T6 I've ever heard because if you had asked me before I started doing research on this, I wouldn't remember that he was T6 from last week. And I think that's a good indication of what you're saying in that he is not, about to have that letdown because I feel like if he was going to have a letdown, we would have seen it last week. You know what I mean? And so to see him go over, back into the UK and finish T6 the Scottish Open, I think that's a really good sign. And I would not bet him outright this week, but as a top
Yeah.
10, I love the bet. I
Yeah,
love
it's
the
a
bet
two
because
unit.
I
It's a 2 unit bet for me for sure. I really feel like Fitzpatrick's going to come to play, and I think even if he has to make like a Sunday charge to get into that top 10, I see him really making some noise.
no, I Fitzpatrick was someone I looked at for a top 10 as well. So I want to argue with you, but I can't. So I will move on to my top 10 pick, who you might have some qualms about because people always have qualms with Tony Finau, who I have finishing in the top 10. So he has been flashing more Tony Finau esque form recently. In his last four starts, he's had a T4, a T2. He did miss a cut, but then he was T13 in the other. And he's actually quietly been very good at the British Open / Open Championship over his career. He's finished T15 or better in each of his last three appearances, and he has two top tens in that stretch as well. And I also heard this nugget today. He's played four times in his career in Scotland and has never finished outside the top 20. So Tony Finau is a great links player that no one's talking about. Over the last 20 rounds, he ranks eighth in the field in strokes gained tee to green. And more importantly, over that span, he's rediscovered the ability to putt, which was what
Yeah.
was really killing him earlier in this year. And now he's gaining about zero point 0.4 strokes per round on the greens. And with his ability to, I love his ability to dial distances off the tee. Like he can take some off his driver or he can let it loose. And I think that's going to play so well at St. Andrews. And I think that's probably one of the reasons why he's been so successful when he's played in Scotland. And so getting plus 400 for a top 10 for a dude who's finished in the top 10 two of the last three times he's played the Open, I love that number.
Yeah, I mean, I love the number. I think that's as exciting to me as anything. I was gonna rip your pick. I was told you I was doing some research, but I saw the same thing about his putting. It's really improved. I think it was like the Canadian Open where he like should have won that, but he missed like three or
Mm-hmm.
four putts inside 6 feet on Sunday. And I was watching him like, oh my God, I can't watch you putt because you're so good in everything else. I saw what you had mentioned though about the about his play over in Scotland, his play on links courses. He's been solid over there. So I want to not like this pick, but especially at that number plus 400, I think it's a good value pick. I think you might be sweating it out, but I think it's a good value pick for sure.
I mean, you can't pick Tony Finau and not expect to sweat. That's kind of his brand from the betting community. So, yeah, I mean, I'm fully prepared to sweat it out. But I mean, when I'm looking at the history, both in Scotland and at the Open, and the fact that he's trending in the right direction overall with his form, I just think this is a guy who, once again, I'm not going to bet him outright. I wouldn't dare think of betting Tony Finau in an outright at a major championship. But as a top 10 at this price, like I love that. So here's where we are both probably going to disagree with each other's picks. Let's go into our top five picks.
Yeah, so I think John Rahm is a guy who, for some reason, nobody's talking about him. It's probably because he, hasn't exactly like killed it. He kind of faded at the end of the U.S. Open. I know he didn't play well at the Scottish Open. I mean, he made the cut, but then had a tough weekend, I believe. But I just think he's a guy who always steps up in majors. John Rahm. He is the type of player who I really would target in a moment like this. And at plus 410. I feel like it's a high enough number that it's worth investing a little bit. I'm maybe do a half unit on this or something like that. But the reason why I really like him is he's got top 15 finish in his last 2 British Open championships. He's got 3 top 12 finishes in his last 5 tournaments. And then everybody knows the stats around him. First in strokes gained off the tee, sixth in strokes gained tee to green, 21st in birdie average. This guy can go low. That's what I love about him. We all know that it's going to come down to putting, right? He's a streaky putter. He can make those putts that, like, I mean, we saw it at the US Open last year. He made 2 putts on 17 and 18 that, like, maybe you have like a 7% chance of making one of them, and he drained 2 of them on 17 and 18. I mean, it was insane. But if he gets it going, the proximity to the hole stats are amazing, which I think is going to be big. He's good in links golf, and he can go low. He won the Mexico Open this year. I think the winning score was like 17 under par. So we know, and I think that you're going to have to be at 17 under in order to get a top 5 or something around that number. Because I think the winning score is going to be like 19 under, like when Tiger won there in 2000. So we'll see. I like my Rahm pick. I'm excited to hear you bash it.
So I'm actually using your argument against you with the around the green play, because that's what worries me, and that's why we have it, in my opinion, and from what the stats say, he has always been an elite around the green player when he's and with his rise up the world rankings, and that has not been the case this year. He's actually slightly losing strokes over the last 20 rounds, and he's been about even for the year. And when you pair that with the fact that his putter has not been hot as often as it was last year, that just worries me for a top 5 bet. If you had this as a top 10 bet, which I realize the value would not be there as it is for a top 5, I would be more comfortable with that. But I think, like you said, and I agree with you that the winning score I have it about 21 under, honestly. Because I just think these guys, with the conditions being as docile as they're supposed to be, I think these guys are going to really tear it apart. And I mean, to be clear, I don't think it's going to be, I think it's going to be entertaining and not just a regular PGA Tour event. But I do think the scoring is going to be low. And I think that the around the green play and putting that he's shown this year worry me too much to bet him for a top 5.
That's a fair enough point. And obviously, I have made that argument. I think I'm going to go back to my first point, which is greatness rises to the occasion at St. Andrews. And I really think Rahm has that gene inside of him where he competes at a really high level. So we'll see. As I said, this is a sprinkle. This is like a half unit bet. This is not my big bet. This isn't my confident bet. This is one where I like Rahm's game. I like, where his head's at, even though I know he didn't have a great finish at the Scottish Open. So we'll see. It'll be interesting.
And I mean, you know, John Rahm is the type of player that can make me look like an idiot for arguing with this because he's that good. So I'm not gonna push back too hard on it. And
Well, it's good because now your pick, I'm
rant.
going to argue against your pick.
There we go. I will say I made this. I went on a rant about 2 weeks ago. I also, if I bet them, I only sprinkle top 5. Top 5 is my least favorite bet on the planet.
Yes.
I would rather just bet a guy outright, honestly. But regardless, here we are. My top 5 pick that you absolutely hate, Jordan Spieth. So Jordan Spieth is one of the most frustrating golfers in the world, and I looked at him this week for probably about an hour, moving him around in my betting preview, figuring out where I was going to bet him because I knew I had to because his Open Championship record is just ridiculous. His last 4 appearances at the Open have resulted in T2, T20, T9, and T2, and that doesn't include the Open Championship that he won. So this is a dude who plays well on links golf courses and overseas. He plays well, and the thing why I landed on top 5 and being a little aggressive with Jordan Spieth is because when I think of St. Andrews, like you said and like I've said, I think of the creativity and imagination it takes to get out of some of the spots that you're going to get into with all the undulation in the fairways and the greens. And Spieth is the master of that, and we know that because if you watch the broadcast, you hear him go through every bit of imagination that he's going through when he's talking to Michael Greller, his caddy. And so I just, with his record at the Open Championship and with the way he plays the game, I think he's suited to have success at St. Andrews. I understand that the form, he was T10 last week, but even then, the form this year has been so erratic. And it feels like week to week, you don't know what's going to be hot for him, but something's going to be hot. but I think that his game and the way he sees a golf course is going to suit him well enough at a tournament where he's played well. And I also, to your John Rahm point, I think Spieth has a little bit of that greatness gene in him too. And so that's why I'm going with him at top five at plus 400.
You've got phone ringing in the background. I've got a baby crying for me in the background. We've got it all going on this week. But that's not why I don't like Jordan Spieth. Not because of all the little moments that show that we're, here doing it the best that we can. No, the reason why I don't like him is because of his putting. His putting has been absolutely atrocious this year. He's changed from looking at the hole. He's changed putters. He's changed his grip. He's changed everything on his putting just to try and find some of the magic that made him so great during those runs. And we just really haven't seen Jordan struggle like this putting consistently, right? Before it was that he was spraying drives. This year he's actually driving the ball really long, but he's just not able to kind of convert that around the green. And I think that's the thing that concerns me about him. I agree with you completely. He's the guy who always steps up or seemingly always steps up in moments like this. His game has gotten better as the year has progressed. He played well at the Scottish Open, but my concern, and to your point, listen, top five, it's tough. My concern is that he just has these blow up rounds where like he goes like, I mean, he could shoot 64, 74 at at St. Andrews and potentially miss the cut. Although I don't know if -4 will get it done, but it's just one of those things where if he doesn't string two rounds together on the first 2 days, he could be out of it before the weekend even begins. So that's my concern about him, and it's about the putting. It just seems like what the problem was before, he's now fixed, and now what was the solution before is now a problem. And I think that, and I love Jordan Spieth, by the way. I'm a huge Jordan Spieth guy. I hope that your bet is right. I hope it hits. I think the number is good, but it's hard for me to bet on a guy to finish top five when he's got a 74 in him easy.
And you're 100% right, but I also look at it as, he could shoot 69, 69, make a cut on the number, and then go 64, 63 on the weekend and be right in contention because he's also that type of player. I mean, betting on Jordan Spieth is probably the sweatiest of propositions. If you like, it is a roller coaster ride for 72 holes. So I know what I'm getting myself into. And I mean, your points are all valid. I don't have any real counter arguments to them, but I'm just betting on the history and him rising to the moment.
It's just a
Now
sprinkle.
we,
It's just a sprinkle.
that's right, just a little bit. Now we are to the point of agreement. So give us both of our winner picks.
Which I really hate that we're both on Rory, but I can't get off him. I've been on Rory literally every major this year. I put a unit on him every major. He starts off so hot in all of them, right? He gets off to this like ridiculous start at the PGA and the US Open, and then he has these like kind of blow up rounds, which of course I'm saying, you know, Jordan, has the same thing. But ultimately, that to me is what matters here is that he has performed well at all of them, even despite having these one blow up rounds. Second outright at Augusta, eighth at the PGA Championship, fifth at the US Open with that really strong finish. There have been those rounds that have gotten away from him, but I also think, when you think about Greg Norman and the motivation that Greg Norman has provided for Rory, it's insane. And he's clearly motivated to prove that he's among the all-time greats out there. And I really feel like that's what's going to happen. The other thing is you have to go low to win this. I don't know that it's going to be 21 under or 20 under. I'm targeting 19 under as the number, but that's kind of like not here, they're there. But you have to go low. And I really believe that Rory has that ability in him. We know that he does. He's sixth in birdie average. He's first in scoring average. He's second in shots gained around the green, which people forget. He's got an amazing, and that's with his terrible putting, right? Shots gained around the green includes putting, and he's a terrible putter. That's how good he is with his short game. He's got the hands of an angel. I love him around the green, watching him play. And then, of course, what he's best at off the tee, third shots gained off the tee. I already mentioned it earlier, right? 50th Masters 86, Jack wins. 100th US Open at Pebble, Tiger wins. the game rewards legends in moments like this. And I think the passion that Rory has showed for the game, the excitement he showed for the game, the motivation he showed to again remind people of his place in the game, right? You're talking top 20 player of all time. This could really elevate him. And I believe that Rory is going to prove that he's the ultimate legend of this generation, right? Of these guys, who are coming up. I think Rory's going to reestablish himself after some of these other guys have kind of come up and put themselves in this conversation with him.
I mean, as I mentioned, he is also my pick to win, and I'm in 100% agreement with you. And when you're talking about going low, I think the best case for that is in 2010 at St. Andrews when he was a different player, to be clear. But when he played the Open at St. Andrews in 2010, he finished T3 while shooting an 80 on Friday. That's how low he can go at this course, and I think he's gotten better. I mean, he's obviously gotten better in the past 12 years, but I mean, right now, I would argue that this is the best version of Rory McIlroy we've seen from week to week. And I think it goes to that motivation thing that you're talking about. Like, he hasn't, let me see my notes. I mean, three top 10, he's been in the top 10 in every major with two top fives in that stretch. Um, and he's just been like he hasn't finished outside the top 25 in like 3 months. Like the guy is just at the top of the leaderboard every week. Like you said, he starts out hot. I saw first round leader odds at about plus 2,200. I'm definitely sprinkling on that for Rory. I hate first round leader bets, but the way he's played in first round of majors, I'm gonna have to sprinkle on that. Um, I hate the number plus 900 is disgusting for an outright winner, but I cannot see Rory McIlroy coming into this tournament, like you said, with the historical significance of it, and with the way he's playing, the way he's driving the ball, both like always far, but as accurately as he's hitting it right now, and the way he can pick his spots. And then, like you said, like his around the green game is so good. But one of the things that, especially last year, that people were really harping on were like his like pitches and little flippy wedges from like that 75-yard range or whatever. And one of the reasons he's had success in these rounds at majors is he's improved on that so much this year, and you can see it with his proximity numbers there. And I just think that the combination of everything he's doing right now, plus the historical significance, I couldn't bet on anyone else but Roy McIlroy to win this thing.
And listen, ultimately, what I really love, and I agree, this number 900, it hurts, like, because you're not even making much if you're putting $100 on it, and obviously it's a lot to risk for less reward. But I'll say this about Rory. As much as people want to talk about the negatives with him, he's not focused on that anymore, and you can tell that weighed on him a lot in past rounds. Like the way that he bounced back at the US Open after that absolute implosion, that said a lot to me about where his head's at. There's a belief there that wasn't there before. And he doesn't need those kind of Sunday comebacks to get the top tens, which is what has happened on some of those moments what you're talking about, right? He'll have a couple of really great early rounds, then he'll have this blow up round. But I'll just say that the thing that most excites me about this is the significance of it to Rory. He's like Tiger. He knows how important this is. And he knows that this is a moment to reestablish himself amongst his peers, who all, quite frankly, are younger than him by a couple years mostly. But like, he just has this insane ability, in my opinion, to just step up when the moment matters most. And I know he hasn't done it in majors, but I think that's what we're going to see this week is him finally put it together for 4 rounds. And even if he has one round where it's like a 69, him being able to eke out that 3 under and then put up like a 64 or 65 to back it up.
I mean, going back to what I said about 2010, if he shoots a 69 on Friday instead of an 80, he wins by 3 strokes. So, I mean, like, that's just what we're talking about here. Like, and I think he, like you said, he has developed that ability, and especially in this type of moment, to limit the blow up round, if that makes sense. Like, the blow up round isn't necessarily going to be something that's hugely detrimental. And with the way he can score at this place, I mean, I think you're foolish. Even if you don't bet on him, I think you're foolish to not have him in consideration, if that makes sense.
My son wants to place his bet. I can see. I've muted myself because he's talking in my ear. He said he loves Rory as well. So that's 3 of us, which means it's definitely not hitting, which is going to be heartbreaking when Rory does it to me again.
I know it. All right. So, Brian, will you recap your picks real quick for this week?
Yeah, absolutely. I hate Taylor Gooch, not only because he's joined the Live Tour, because I just don't think he's ready for this moment. He's going to miss the cut. Tiger Woods top 20, not just because of the emotional things, but I just really think his game's in a place where he can compete this week, and I think he's going to. Matt Fitzpatrick top 10. That's my favorite play. It's only plus 220, but at the same time, I just think Fitzpatrick's game is in a really good place right now, especially setting up well for St. Andrews. John Ron top 5. I know you don't like him. His around the green game is leaves a lot to be desired, but I think that this week it's going to be about making birdies, and he makes them as well as anybody. And then speaking of the guy who makes the most birdies on tour, or just about the most birdies on tour, Rory McIlroy to win it out overall.
All right. And then for me, I have Scotty Scheffler to miss the cut and the bold call of the week. Top 20, I have Max Homa. Top 10, Tony Finau. Top 5, Jordan Spieth. And then also Rory McIlroy to win. So all boats are sailing with Rory this week. Please like and subscribe to the BetSided channel. We're here every week talking golf. And Brian, thanks for joining us today. And enjoy the Open Championship this week.
This was great. I'm so excited. Thank you for having me. George says goodbye as well.
Bye, George. I hope you enjoy the Open Championship as much as we will. Have a good one, everybody.